Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. You are here today with us. We are Aja. She's our quality assurance manager, and I'm David, the head of sales at PayTestLab. And we speak about how you can achieve CI and CD in payment software testing. So many of you will start to wonder what does CI/CD stand for, but that's what we are explaining in today's webinar. And our agenda will be the introduction to CI/CD, followed by the benefits of it, then how we integrated CI/CD at PayTestLab, and then we show you what improvements we are planning on our roadmap to make CI/CD even smoother to be implemented with our solutions. Then we're going to do a live demo and a Q&A session at the end. You know how we handle this from the last webinars. There's quite a few of you which have joined previously. So if you have any questions, drop them into the Q&A session during the meeting. And at the end, we will focus on them. And yeah, we get going. So first of all, we want to test your knowledge a little bit. And we want to know, are you familiar with the terms CI/CD and what they mean? Or have you not heard at all about that? So we are keen to see what the votes will be. And I'll wait until half of you have answered. Give it a few more seconds. There we go. That's mostly a new topic for all of you. This is new to the most of you, so we're gonna take it also on a high level today. There's always the possibility to dive deeper afterwards with us in a one-on-one session. So we also would like to better understand how do you work internally. So what development framework do you use? Do you use Azure DevOps? Do you use Jenkins, GitLab, GitHub, or none at all because you're not a developer? Or do you use something else which is not listed today? It's a mix. We got some people which are not developers and some quite broad of just all the different softwares. That's to expect. So we also use Azure internally, so that's some similarity to what we use. But yeah, we will focus mainly on PayTestHub itself. And the last one before we kick off with CI/CD, how often do you run a test cycle on your software? So do you do that daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or do you just test on a need be base whenever you want to do the next release? Wow, there's a few people testing daily. That's nice. All right, I'm going to publish that as well. So you can see there's a few people testing daily. Most of you test just on a need basis. So whenever you need to test, then test is done. So this is, yeah, can all be part of a CI/CD process as well. All right, let's start with the introduction into continuous integration and continuous deployment. So what is CI/CD and what does it actually stand for? We start with continuous integration. Imagine you have multiple developers working all on the same code, and they need to test their individual code snippets on one build on the test framework. So this is quite tricky to achieve, but if you implement a continuous integration process, you also set up a fixed set of regression tests, for example, and then you put together all the codes into one build and you push it into your Q&A environment and you test it before you release it into the production deployment. This really helps you to identify issues in a very early stage during your coding, because you don't wait until your sprint is finished before you start to test, but you test on the fly. So for example, you could test daily, and that's what it's called, a continuous integration. So regular testing in an automated way with repeatable test cases. From continuous integration, you move then into a continuous delivery. And that's basically once you have tested your first code, you release it into production, and then you automate as well different test cycles and process so that in the production environment, you still make sure that all the tests are executed regularly. And especially important then, and it's very hand in hand, is a continuous deployment. So you have to monitor your code and make sure that no bugs are implemented with new features, for example. And then you can set up daily, weekly, or monthly test sets which are executed on those frequencies to find additional bugs and then implement fixes. So it's a bit easier to understand if you look at it in this graphic. So it all starts with building your code. That's always the beginning. And then once your code has been done, you put it into your build and push it into your test pipeline. This can be automated, and then you run automated test case on your payment terminal with robotics and with Paytest Hub. And that's what we're going to show you today then afterwards. So once the continuous testing is done, you push your code into the release, into the production and deploy it. And then you keep monitoring it and you plan your next sprints. And if you find any bugs, you plan them into the fix and then continue to code, build, test, release, deploy. And that's then when you achieve a continuous integration and delivery deployment process. There's clearly some benefits to that. So first of all, you are drastically improving the quality and the security of your software because you can just test way more and often, which improves your overall software and stability. Then you have a faster time to market as you're now able to test on a daily, weekly, monthly base instead of just testing at the end of your sprint. You can reduce your release cycle time. So Abrantix achieved with CI/CD a release cycle time from 6 months. They could decrease it to once a month with a production release, which is a huge improvement in terms of customer satisfaction. And also, this leads to a big competitive advantage because you are now able to implement new features or bug fixes much faster than your competitors. So the overall satisfaction of your solution is improved. Then important to know and to keep in mind, if you have a stable and well implemented CI/CD process, your developers can now focus on really their core skills. So be it focusing on writing additional code, or if you have well experienced testers, if they don't need to do the tests manually, they can also focus on building a better test coverage for your software so that you can test additional features which you weren't able to do so previously. And lastly, not to forget, if you are a company which uses modern solution and robotic hardware and software which supports the employees, you're also able to attract more talents into your company and therefore have maybe the better mindsets in your company, better developers to work on your code as well. Now, let's focus on how Paytest Lab implements CI/CD, and with that, I hand it over to Asha. You are invited to share your screen and walk us through those steps.
Hello, everybody. I will be talking about how you can improve your CI/CD process with the use of Paytest Lab and Paytest Hub. So this is a typical implementation of CI/CD on a daily basis in the Abrantix offices. So of course, everybody starts with development in Visual Studios. So multiple developers are working on one singular solution where they then push their code into review in Azure DevOps, where it gets reviewed by other developers and also checked by Azure DevOps and then it gets built into the code in the next day. This is when we get the nightly build, which is built every day. The testers then deploy that software onto the terminals, where we then, with Paytest Hub, run the daily test sets onto the terminals, testing the code that was built the night before every single day. The daily test run is then reported back to the developers. If we have any issues or bugs and anything was broken in the code, that's when it goes into the debugging stages where the developers rebuild the code and fix it. When it then gets retested again, and then the cycle continues the next day with more new improvements, more updates to the nightly, and more tests. So the timeline of the for the Abrantex testing is also done on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. All of these have different testing sessions. So daily, we do test about 5 different terminals with full automation and about 300 test cases total. These test the most important things on the terminal, such as a purchase transaction or as many transactions as we can possibly put in automation so that we have a full coverage of the abilities of the terminal. On the weekly cycle, we test daily testing plus any crucial transactions on the production terminals, where we also received a signed release, which is a release that works with real cards that are out in the field, so your standard Visa card in your wallet. This is tested weekly, just so we know that the production is also working. And then monthly, we have the most rigorous testing session where we test daily tests, of course, plus the sign releases, and then over 50 brands of manual regression testing where we do truly test exactly as the terminal would be out in the field and for specific brands, specific setup for specific brands. So with Paytest Hub, we can achieve a lot of this testing, and we're also looking to improve on a lot of this. The first thing that we are looking to strive towards is the implementation of AI into our test cases, which would make writing them a lot easier and faster. We're also looking into Paytest Card, where we can have our cards on the cloud, which would eliminate a lot of the hardware issues that we have with cards, so less cards and usages from all over the world. And of course, the Paytest Hub software itself. We wanted to have even more verbose that the reports are even more verbose and include even more information. We want more routines and of course, extraction and validations using AI. So even the checking of very specific and minor details is done using AI. So I will now go over some live demo of the Paytest Hub and our test sets. I want to show how to build an automated test set, what are some best practices, and then our cycles for the daily, weekly, and monthly, and then debugging and reporting.
There's one
So
more slide, Asha, the naming.
yes, I think I'll get to that one in a bit.
Okay.
When I talk about the making of the test set.
Perfect.
So basically, in Paytest Hub, we use it as a great organizational website, and also, of course, where we can run all these tests. It all depends on the agents, of course, and we have our daily agent where we have all of the terminals that I spoke about. We have several different configurations of the terminals and as many environments as possible so that we can really test a lot during the daily testing. We have terminals that range from purchase transactions to then pre-authorization transactions, hospitality, and so on, Da Vinci, Valina. So attended, unattended terminals, petrol terminals. And these are then our test sets for the daily testing, where we have, again, multiple robots and different test sets with a lot of test cases that have a lot of coverage. So something like the castle test set would have a lot of contact transactions, so purchase transactions, then contactless transactions with purchase credit verification. We have negative test flows, which are very important to have, especially on a daily test set, because a lot of these are extremely repetitive test cases, which are very tedious to do by hand. But on a daily test set that is automated, it actually makes the process really quick, and you can test a lot of negative flows that would otherwise be tested very little, since it's hard to test blocked card response if you don't have a blocked card. But in the automated test, it is basically automated. And we have some more things here like dialogues, which are again very tedious to do by hand. So something like this is a typical daily test set for one terminal, and then we have this for about 5 different terminals. So we get through a lot of different transaction flows in just an hour a day, and fully automated, which shortens the CI/CD process down a lot. I will now show you how you can make a nice test set like this. And I think the most important thing to know is specifically what you want to test. So we can give it a name for the daily test set. And let's say that this one's for castles. And it's really important to know what your castles terminal does. Does it do purchase transactions? Does it do reservation? And so on. So we can, and also it's nice to segment it into folders. So something like contact transactions and contactless transactions. Purchase, which goes into contact. It's very simple drag and drop. Credit. Again, you're just dragging and dropping the folders, and similarly with the test cases. You can select a contactless purchase, maybe a credit, and a purchase and credit contact. So we can just drag and drop it into our folders. Basically, it's also very important to know if your daily test set or test set that you're building is made for the robot or for humans, because if you're doing a manual test set, it's also very nice to have it start with the card first and then going into specifics of the transactions, be it contactless, contact, magstripe, because it's nice when the tester can hold the card in their hand for a longer period of time. So these are two very similar test sets, except one is for the robot and one is for manual testing. So this one is just contact and then cards, because the robot doesn't care which card it uses, and it's sort of nicer to see that the contact and contactless are separated. But then when it's for a person, it's nicer if the cards are all clumped together, because it makes it easier for the human. And now also for the test case makeup, it's so this is what we had our last slide in the webinar. Basically, it's about the composition of the name of the test case. It's really nice to have a naming convention when you are it's nice to have a good naming convention when you have a lot of test cases. And at least here in Abrontics, I'm so sorry for this.
Good.
So sorry. So in Abrontics, what we have for the
We are.
naming convention is that we start with the name of the release, so that we know for exactly which release this test case was made, and we know that that is the release that the test case was working on. We also have the name of the person who made the test case, just so you know who you refer to if something goes wrong. We have the date of the test case, and then lastly, a sequential number. This is also mostly done so you can almost never repeat a same test case. Usually somebody is working on a different date, and also you have sequential numbers. It's important to have a good naming convention for the test cases as well, just so that it's very easy to find where the test case works when something doesn't work. So if you see that the release was done on the 2080 release and it somehow isn't working on the 2090, you can then retest the test case and see, oh, was it still working then? Usually the answer is yes. And then you see, okay, we definitely broke something on the 2090 release. So maybe to continue with the test set, something that we could not put in this test set because the terminal is like a purchase terminal is pre-authorization. Those usually can't work together. But we can continue with any other transaction types And it's basically just nice to have a very structured test set, sort of like this, so you can easily see what is happening. So I will maybe also run this test set, just run it or not. Oh. Okay. Well, I guess something is working.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a bug.
So pretty much while you're running these, you can also see the state of the terminal. Actually, yeah, you can see the state of the terminal both from 6ML and the ADB. And also you have a lot of logs for the terminal, which is then, so both logs and, not this image. So both logs, receipts, and things like these that we have extra on the right side of the page. We will be, we are working on including all of these informations in the report, verbosity, in the report. So then, so you can see as much information as you have on the regular test set. So maybe we can also stop this, I suppose.
So
And
for
once
anyone who
we,
hasn't seen that
yeah.
part of the test execution yet, go to our YouTube channel, and there's all the recordings from the previous webinars where we highlighted as well how we write test case and how we execute them, what Asha is doing right now. So there you can dive deeper into that specific topic.
So once we are done with our test run, that's when we can do the reporting from the PDF. And then since we had a test case that failed, maybe we could send this to our developers and have them check out the bug. The developers can also find the test set on the web page itself. So you can also send maybe the link to the test set where they have more information. So pretty much our report. Where you can see who made it, when, and then the state of the test cases. So this one sadly failed. These two were okay. And then the rest we didn't run through yet. So this one was successful. You can see what variables we had and so on. And again, we will have even more information in this, pictures or receipts or more logs if need be, basically by choice. And here is the test run as well. So somebody can look at it. So let's say that we now reported the bugs to the developers. The developers have given us a new release. So now we can test, does the first test case actually work? Well, if we can rerun it then, and we can rerun only the things that failed, or usually if you're doing on a new software, it's good to run everything. But for the purposes of this, maybe we can just go like this. And so now we see that the developers have fixed the issue and the first test case is actually working. So this is sort of the CI/CD thing where you test it, send off the report, you have a new release that's fixed, and then you retest it again. And if you run all the test case, you can see if anything else was broken while they were actually fixing the issue. So if we had run the full test set, we could see maybe this test case this time didn't actually work because they have broken something else. And that's really the purpose of the CI/CD, where you can have constant releases and test them in as quick a way as possible, where you can have results as quickly as possible and as quickly as possible. See the issues and fix them and test them again and again and again and again. This is why the daily, while they are quite long, they actually don't take all that long a time, and a person isn't necessarily needed to be present to the whole thing because it is automated. So somebody can just leave, do other things while this is working. So really, they don't take that long, unlike regressions, which I'm going to show you now. So we have regression testing on a different tenant. So this is where we have all of our regressions. In the regression test set, they are all sorted by releases. So for the release 3.2.50, we did these regression testing. For some other release, we did a lot more regressions. Then all of these then have their individual test set. And then all of this is, of course, run, and all of this is then tested. So this is just a manual test set. This is why these take so long, because they are just, and some of them are just manual, where you need to set up your terminal, you need to go through the steps. This takes a lot longer. Regressions usually take about 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, depending on how many people you really have working there and how much acquirers you chose to do. For our regression testing, we also have really neatly set up environments. Basically, for any terminal that we are running, we have a different environment set up. So if we were running a COP test on a Yamani, this is then all of our configuration for it. So this is our PID for this terminal, the guide set on it, and so on. And we used to have to do all of this manually each time for every terminal. So you would have to set everything up and set up your environment, change the TID, change the configuration, the guides, so on. And this can be actually quite time consuming. So, but now everything is on Paytest Hub, and you just need to switch the environment, and that's it, because they're already perfectly set up for exactly the things that need to be tested. So this is done, as I said, monthly. And we are also working on actually making all of this on the robot as well. Currently, it's going a bit slow, but we have some test cases for the robot. So essentially the same as what the human would do, except now it's done by the robot, which again shortens the testing process significantly. And if we could automate all of our, well, we can't actually automate a lot of our regression testing, or not all of them, because a lot of them are things that need to be done manually, sort of like a port scan, perhaps, if anybody does test that. Which ports are open on the terminal, something like that is tested, just so we see that we don't have all of them open, or that just specific ones are open that need to be. That's something that we can't really do with the automated testing, which is why a lot of our regressions are still manual. But we are trying to do as much as possible with the automated testing, which is again why we need both the daily test set and then the regression test set, because there are just some things that can't be automated. And also you do sometimes need to have the human element where they can see this, when they can hear the terminal as well or something, and see it, I guess. I think I also mentioned weekly testing, but that's not that interesting. They're pretty much similar to the daily testing test cases anyway.
What's the difference? We just run them on a different frequency because it's a bit more.
Yeah, it's a different terminal type. So the test case is the same, but we're using different cards, and the software is somewhat different as well. And the software needs to be sent to a third party and then sent back, actually.
All right.
So that's why it's a bit. actually think that might be it. So we have so we sorted the thing.
Okay, so
any questions?
yeah, there's quite a few questions,
Yes.
and don't be hesitant to
Sure.
add more. Just drop them into our Q&A. Asha, I would suggest we start with answering the questions, and then we see how we get along with the time, and we can focus on specific topics again to highlight something if need be. So let me see. We're gonna start here. Everyone should see that now. So what are some common pitfalls to avoid when implementing CI/CD for payment software?
Basically, the most common pitfall, since you're constantly working on the code, is spaghetti code and overworking the code. So it's very important to keep the code readable for anybody new joining, and to keep it streamlined as well. Yeah, it's important to basically have very good organization in the code and in the testing process as well. Yeah.
Thanks for that. So the next one is here. How can small, medium-sized business benefit from CI/CD in payment software testing? So why should somebody with maybe limited resources focus on implementing CI/CD?
So basically, a small company can really benefit a lot from especially automated testing daily, because you don't need a lot of people to do it, and it does check a lot, especially the most important things on your code. So you have daily checks of the code, and you can work on it. You can very quickly see and find out what is wrong on the code. And if you don't have a lot of people that are maybe after a month doing a lot of vigorous testing, you can lose a lot of that if you're just working on it, let's say, every few months. If you don't have a lot of people, they can't check all of it. So if you have it done daily and it's automated, it is much quicker to check, to find the
More
problems.
consistent overall, huh? You save a
Yes,
lot of
more
resource
consistent.
from testing, which you can use for coding. Yeah, perfect. Then we got one here. So can this be also used for ATM or kiosk? I assume that kiosk is like a self-service kiosk in, let's say, a McDonald's, where you will go in and have an integrated setup.
Yeah, we do have something in our regression testing basically done for the kiosk. Am I still sharing?
Yes.
Yes. We even made some test sets for kiosk specifically with the robot, but this isn't quite as nicely done. I think we also have more in the basically you can use it. It's all about the hardware that you have. If you have the hardware for the ATM or the kiosk, if you have the specific terminals that you need, then you can, of course, use this. And then again, you can also make it manual. So you just write a manual test case for how this is supposed to be tested, and then you run it there. But it's all about the hardware. If you can make the hardware, if you can somehow automate the hardware, then you can use it. Yeah. And we do have
Within
some
PayTestHub, yeah. But
yeah,
also to add, CI/CD is not about it's the whole process around that you implement this continuous testing, development, and coding into one setup, so you are more productive. If, for example, you can, as you say, if you can connect the hardware right now to PayTestHub, you could still write manual test cases and then have them in a more automated way by just having always the same steps you follow, and then at least the reporting would be automated, and then you can add other steps at a later stage. So we have experience with kiosk. We don't have so much experience with ATM, but that's something we could look into as well, certainly. Then let's see, we have, this is a good one there. What are the challenges of integrating CI with legacy payment systems? So how would you do it if you have two different firmwares you need to keep up and maintain?
So basically in PayTestHub, we have this done through through different environments and some different test sets. Basically, we had a similar issue at one point where we had a Valina with an old keyboard that we still needed testing, but we also had a release where it had an updated keyboard. So now we have basically two environments, one with the older Valina, one with the new Valina, and one is Valina old. Since the only difference here was a keyboard, we actually needed a different terminal type for the robot so that the robot is clicking the correct coordinates with the old keyboard. And you can keep this test set similarly here. I think it's here under, I think it's under older releases now with Valina. So basically, these are the old releases that we still keep for the robots. And essentially, you can test them with either, if nothing changes in the configuration, you can still, of course, use the correct agent, but basically, you're still storing the older releases in Paytest Hub, and you just don't run them daily, or you run them when you need to test the older hardware.
That's great. And
Or
then
the
with the
legacy
correct naming, it's easy to find the release to which firmware it connects, and then
Yeah.
you can run that again. So I'm just gonna scroll up here again. Here we're gonna take that one. What types of automated tests are most beneficial in a CI/CD pipeline? Where should somebody start with building their pipeline CI/CD?
Right, of course. No, it's hard to start with 70 different test cases for a terminal. I think that the most important one is the one that you're basically doing the most. So since we're usually testing terminal software, something that people are going to do the most is a normal purchase transaction on the contactless. So that's the one that's definitely the most important to have. That's good to test on a daily basis because that's definitely something that's going to be used all the time. And if that breaks, you basically broke the whole thing, the whole software. And so that's something that you need to know instantly, right, to fix as well. So basically, whatever it is that you have on your software that is the most important thing to you is something that should be tested daily. And then you can just go there from levels of importance, right? So on a terminal, we usually also do credit. That's something that happens quite often, or reversal, even more so than credit. So then those, and then probably not a lot of people are doing balance, inquire, terminal in stores. So maybe you need that tested every day. Maybe you don't. If you don't have the capacity for it, if you somehow can't test it, if you don't have the hardware, whatever, then you just don't test it daily. But you maybe test it monthly when you can. So it's important to know your own level of importance of the product.
Perfect, thanks. There's a follow-up question on the ATM kiosk I'm gonna take here. The question if it CI/CD or the testing requires a robot, and I would say that, and also if it could be used for card issuing, card printing machine. So if you want to achieve automation to a high level, you will be needing a robot to do the manual work for you, because that's the main part, which is labor consumption and resource, which the manual testing is what we want to get rid of and automate. So doing that without the robot would be quite tricky to achieve. You have something to add to that point?
Not really.
Then I got another one for you. What about metrics? So what are some key metrics to monitor in a CI/CD pipeline? Is there anything we can measure and maybe compare one test set to another or something? Would you say that your pipeline is successful?
Your pipeline is definitely successful when you can break the code and know within a few hours that you broke something, and then also in a few hours get it fixed, and then again in a few hours somebody's like, "Yep, you fixed it." That's when your CI/CD is the most successful, and it's so great to see when you develop a test set and goes from a few purchase transactions to a really huge test set and you maybe had a bug at some point that is now in your test set daily, and sometimes it just comes back and you caught it right away and you can just fix it right away as well. Yeah, it's great when you can see some very specific things be broken and you caught them instantly. That's when you know you have a really good CI/CD.
And that would be done simply by, you have a bug, you change the code, load it, and rerun the tests.
Yeah, so basically, let's say you have your daily test set, and every time you find a new bug and you know, oh, I can automate this, you make the test case for it, you put it in the daily test set, and then basically, okay, the bug is no longer there, it was fixed, so now the test case is always successful. And then one day the test case doesn't work, and you're like, wait, is this the same bug as we had before? Oh, it is. Somebody broke it again, and you're like, okay, it was this bug. This is how we fixed it last time. Does this still work? And somebody goes to fix it, blah, blah, blah. If they do, you have a really good CI/CD. Or maybe it's a different fix this time, but either way, when you have test cases that find some very specific things, that's when it's really successful.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Here, I think we weren't a bit too fast on that one before. So what role does the version control play in CI/CD? Could we look at that again? That so the managing the test cases between different firmware or releases, and maybe highlight the test case naming again there.
Right. So basically, it's so this is when the test case. This is the release where the test case was made on. So the release is 22080. That's basically the release name, and that's the release that the test case was made on and tested on. So we know that on this release, this is exactly how the transaction behaved. I don't know. It asked for a pin. These were the it asked for a pin. It was successful. Blah blah blah. The test case was successful on this release. So on the next release, if anything changes, you can then go and make a new test case, which is on a new release, and it is maybe slightly different because of the changes that were made. So maybe now going forward, the old test case is sort of made redundant because we're testing it in a new way. But you always know that it was working this way on this release, and then from then on, it either stayed the same or it was changed, I suppose. But the important thing is that we know that it worked specifically like this on this specific software, or yeah.
Okay, and then you keep them in the different sets, right, where you have the all test cases in it.
Yeah, if something's changed, you can keep it in the old test sets. If it's all the same, then it just continues to move forward.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Then we have one more question, and if anyone has more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we gonna be finished afterwards. Then, so what strategies can we employ to ensure that the CI pipeline remains efficient and scalable when the software gets more complex? So how would you, if you have an existing feature, for example, and you add a new one, how would we make sure that this is still tested then if your software gets more complex?
So you test both the new features and either the old features as well, basically.
Correct.
So
Yes.
that you know that you haven't broken the old features with the new one, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why also the naming is of the release that it was on. So you do know where it worked, and if you break it with a new feature, you can still go back and it still works that way on the release that was made on, you know.
Yeah, that's one way to do it, I assume. And then it's important that during the first phase, when you build the first code, that you test already together with the other softwares before you put it into the deployment. Yeah, before you release it. Otherwise, you're gonna be too late. Great. I think that's it for today. We don't have any more questions. we will share the recording certainly once it's available on our YouTube channel. And for anyone who wants to have a one-on-one session, I'm also going to share my booking page so you can schedule a meeting with me. Then the next webinar will be hosted in July. It's going to be a very exciting topic, but I'm not going to spoil that for you right now. So make sure you keep an eye on our socials and yeah, sign up for our newsletter. And then thanks for joining, and we see each other again in 4 weeks. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.